Hello everyone, TJOmega here for day 887 of daily content on this YouTube channel, and once again, we are answering a Patreon request. So, as part of my Patreon, if you subscribe at $15 or more a month, then you get to make video requests. Just about any format I do and any topic you want from me outside of Plastic Addict and TJTV, the stuff that would take up, all of my spare time for an entire month just to do one video. But generally, anything outside of that, I am willing to do. Now, whenever I actually answer your request, you're free to then leave another one. And they can take a while to get to because some of them are very weird concepts or take so much research that I don't have the time to get to it. I appreciate the people who are being very patient with those. And this is one where I really wanted to get a really concrete idea before I put it down to video. This is another example of a Transformer character who is woefully underused, and we are talking about Armada Sideways. Very popular character from the show. One of the standout original characters. I would say the standout original character from that particular generation of Transformers. But considering how much of an impact he left and what a cool role he played, it is kind of surprising that they've never gone back and used the character again in any way, shape, or form outside of a character who shared the name in Revenge of the Fallen. And let's be honest, it's not actually Sideways. It's just a guy with the same name. So we are going to explore how I would use Sideways in a brand new story. And we're going to establish a few things first. Number one, we're ditching the whole multi-universal Sideways concept. So in recent years, Hasbro has gone out of their way to acknowledge that not every Unicron is the same Unicron crossing dimensions. That's true in some fictions, but sometimes it's not true. And there are multiple Unicrons across the multiverse, which means there are multiple Sideways. We know from, other shows that there are other characters out there with kind of the same shtick going on, but they come from different places. So for instance, Cybertron, we know that they weren't supposed to be the same Sideways, right? So in Micron Densetsu, the character is Double Face, and in Galaxy Force, the character is Noise Maze, because Galaxy Force was never meant to be canonical to those series. That was a Hasbro thing. So we're ditching this incarnation of Sideways, and we are sticking to the Armada incarnation. As cool of a design as Cybertron Sideways is, I think we can agree that the Armada one has him beat as far as characterization and story importance goes. So we're going to go with that iteration instead. As far as where we are setting this, for this particular story to work, we're going to set this after Season 4 of Generation 1, or in any particular brand new universe where we are in a similar situation. The planet Cybertron has been completely revitalized, which leads us to a few story possibilities, like refugees from off-world returning to the planet now that it is re-energized and capable of supporting large numbers of Transformer life once again. This is also giving the Decepticons a chance to return and reclaim their cities. So the planet now has a Decepticon presence, in this case, likely led by Galvatron. If we're doing this post-Generation 1, if it's a brand new story, it can be Megatron. That element does not really matter in this particular story. We're just presenting this as how I would present Sideways in a brand new story, regardless of the actual setting. So let's just say, yes, there are, post-Unicron and post-revival of the planet, there are refugees returning to the planet Cybertron. When one of them lands, and Optimus Prime, being the leader that he is, he does make a point to actually greet the returning Transformers to the planet. And among them is something of an oddity that he takes a particular notice of. And it is a black-headed Autobot who is actually walking with a small gray Transformer. Now, at this point, they are aware of headmasters as a thing amongst Transformers and Transformer tech. However, they've never actually seen one that was autonomous like this. There's no human or Nebulon inside. It's a completely mechanical creature, speaking in what sounds like techno gibberish. But this bot seems to understand it, and they seem to be connected somehow. So he does introduce himself as Sideways, and he explains that, yeah, he was a refugee who left the planet, prior to, Unicron's arrival, and now returning is eager to rejoin the Autobots. Well, you kind of have to go through the motions a little bit. Optimus has obviously taken an interest because of his unique situation. However, you do still kind of have to pull your load. So Sideways does what he does. He actually tries to get in and ingratiate himself to the Autobots. He makes some friends there. He does some tours of duty over on Earth, and generally just seems to be an asset to the Autobots themselves. So after a while, he does build up friendships, and eventually does build up the rapport with Optimus Prime that allows him to actually ask Prime if he can have a private audience. And when he means private, he means very private, as he has abilities that he thinks could serve the Autobots well, but if anyone were to discover what those abilities are, they would no longer be useful. So this has to be done with just the closest circle of trusted Autobots that Optimus Prime has. So the meeting is made. Optimus Prime meets with Sideways in private on Cybertron, and only a few very select Transformers are there with him. The likes of Ultra Magnus is there. Cup is there. Perceptor is there as well, because some form of scientist was actually requested so that a point could be proven. And Sideways actually has Perceptor scan him over and tell him what he reads. And yeah, he reads full Autobot energy signatures, about the stuff that they would expect. No surprises there. It's at this point Sideways actually shows Optimus Prime what he can do. Right in front of the most trusted of Autobots, he switches headmasters, going from the black head to his gray head, with now a little black robot flanking him. And sure enough, his faction symbol switches from Autobot to Decepticon. And at first there's shock in the room. Of course there would be. But Sideways has been amongst the Autobots for a while, and he's been close to Optimus Prime and some very prominent figures more than once. If he was going to do anything as a Decepticon, he'd have done it by now, and he wouldn't be showing off this ability to Optimus Prime in any facet if he was up to something more malevolent. So Optimus actually takes this as, a trustworthy sign of, you're showing me this, so obviously you're not meaning any harm with it. So why are you showing us this ability? He has Perceptor scan him again. And now his energy reading is showing Decepticon, similar to how Teletran 1 used to be able to tell Decepticons. With this trick, this is how Sideways was able to survive on Cybertron even under Decepticon rule. More than once, it did allow him to get under the radar of Shockwave scans, as well as trick a few encounters with more dim-witted soldiers that were still on the planet, like the Rainmakers. So it's allowed him to survive, but now it could actually allow them something else. The Decepticons are rebuilding their forces on Cybertron. They're returning to the planet just as the Autobots were. But right now, what they need is intel. They need to know what the Decepticons are up to. So if Sideways works his way into the Autobots, or into the Decepticons as a double agent, using this little trick to get past them, then he could actually learn what Optimus Prime needs to know about upcoming Decepticon plans and tell him exactly what's going on. It's a dangerous gambit. Optimus not wanting to put someone in danger in such a way, because this is an extremely dangerous position. However, he is kind of left with few options here. For the sake of this story, we're going to assume punch counterpunch is not a factor. And also, just, because this is kind of like a unique trait, right? So we don't want another character usurping this. So yeah, for the sake of this story, there is no punch counterpunch factor. What is going on here is that amongst all of the rejuvenation of Cybertron, the arrival of different refugees, Optimus hasn't had the time to create an intelligence network that could actually feed him information from the Decepticon side. Reluctantly, he actually agrees to this, because right now, they need to know what's going on. To his credit, Sideways is very good at his job. He is actually doing what he needs to do in order to actually get in good with the Decepticons. Now, for the sake of maintaining the ruse, neither side actually sees Sideways on the battlefield. Amongst the Autobots, he's an information gatherer, so he only appears to Optimus and his circles reporting what was going on with the Decepticons and the information they're feeding him. Meanwhile, on the Decepticon side, he's convinced the current leadership that he's not suited for battle and would better serve as a medic of sorts. So he's getting a lot of information from Decepticons who otherwise would be a little bit more tight-lipped, but those lips loosen a little bit when you're in the presence of a bot that's just saved your life and put you back together. So he's getting a lot of nice intel. And to their credit, the Decepticons, the Autobots are playing this rather smoothly, So, and they're not trying to go overboard with the defenses when they find out when Decepticons are attacking. They're just trying to make it look like they were a little bit more prepared than the Decepticons planned for. And it is allowing them to keep the new cities safe while the refugees arrive and while they restore everything. It's actually a pretty good system, and it goes on for quite a while. Sideways and his headmaster friends actually do live up to their end of the bargain, and they're gaining a lot of trust on the Autobot side of things as a result. As an Autobot, Sideways has actually done pretty well for himself, and it's led to the Autobots being much more safe as not only on the battlefield, but also the ones who aren't interested in fighting or just interested in returning home. This only lasts so long, though. See, I'm going about this story this way because this allows Sideways to constantly flip back and forth. The bad part about Sideways and the way he was depicted in both Armada and Cybertron is once he makes that flip, you can't really unflip it. So you have to put him in a role where he's able to switch back and forth between the two heads and really show off the capability there. However, I don't want to leave out the real purpose and role of the character, so inevitably, this system is going to break down. One day, the Autobots report seeing Sideways on the battlefield, but not for them. It's the gray-headed Decepticon version, and he is openly attacking the Autobots. Comes as complete shock to them that one of their own is now fighting on the opposite side of the battlefield, and they report this to Optimus Prime, that Sideways has turned traitor. The problem with that little theory is that Sideways was already seen at a different conflict earlier the same day, and again, taking the battlefield for the first time, but for the Autobots. And really, showing a level of skill that he hadn't shown before and actually being something of a hero of the day. So now you have direct contact for Autobots who saw him on the attack and Autobots who saw him as a hero. And when these start coming into conflict, you start getting chaos. You start having those who believe that he's good and others that believe he's bad and want his head. All of his heads. You get dissension in the ranks, you get confusion, you get chaos, you get a lot of things that Optimus just cannot deal with right now. Fortunately, Optimus is a very stern voice and can shut this down before it gets too much of a problem. He does have some trust in Sideways because of how much good info he's been given thanks to him. However, he does acknowledge there is obviously a Decepticon trick here. So he employs someone who can get to the bottom of this. Another woefully unused character, by the way, and that would be Nightbeat, the resident Autobot detective. If anyone can figure out what exactly is going on with Sideways, then it's him. And initially, it just seems to be what it is. It seems to be that, you know, some Autobots are seeing him as a Decepticon fighting against them in a battle, and others see him on the Autobot side of things. For his part, he's still reporting information to Optimus Prime and denying any kind of actual allegiance to the Decepticons. He doesn't know what's going on either. So it's up to Nightbeat to figure this out. And Nightbeat does have a few connections he can pull. After all, there are some Decepticons who are more than willing to share some gossip for the right price. So there's a little bit of cross-dealing here in order to make this work, but as long as it's not giving away anything vital, Swindle is eager to actually provide. And as it turns out, the same thing is happening on the Decepticon side. There's infighting amongst them. And, especially if this is Galvatron under leadership, he's not very good at keeping his minions, from fighting amongst themselves. So, as it turns out, both sides are being kind of chaotic about spotting Sideways on the battlefield. It's hard on the Decepticons because here is someone who's, turned their guns against them, but there's others on that side who value his time as a medic, and they literally save their lives. It's hard to even imagine that a bot that saved their lives is now turned against them. Infighting, and a lot more than on the Autobot side. And that's just the Swindle gossip. But he shares one more detail, and it's something that Nightbeat picked up on as well. And we'll get to that in a bit, because now we need to figure out how to get to the bottom of this. So, Nightbeat makes a proposal to Optimus Prime, and while it's underhanded and not very Autobot, it's kind of required for this situation. The next time Sideways appears on the battlefield for the Autobots, it is alongside Optimus Prime, who has gone to personally see that this battle goes the correct way. Except during the battle, he is actually in charge of capturing Sideways and subduing him. It's very unexpected. He has not told anyone that this is what's going to happen outside of said inner circle that are assisting him. But eventually, they do get him in Energon binds. He is loaded up into Prime's trailer, and now we have a completely completely sequestered Sideways. Once the battle is won, it's just a matter of waiting. And eventually, yes, there is a conflict where another Sideways is found, and that one being, of course, the Decepticon. So, unless he has teleportation powers, something else is going on here. So again, those close to Prime who are put on that side of things, ironically using the intel Sideways fed them, he has now captured both versions. So, Decepticon Sideways brought to the battlefield that Optimus Prime just took, and opening up the trailer, lo and behold, two Sideways, side by side. And if this was a cartoon episode, I would absolutely make that the title. That has to be the title of the episode. So, from what they can tell, they are both Sideways. They're built identically. They have the right scans and everything. So it doesn't seem to be a Decepticon clone. And according to Nightbeat, it's not. But how? How did Nightbeat actually put it together that there were, in fact, two different Sideways? Well, it all comes down to something Swindle mentioned, though he had a different idea behind it. See, Nightbeat had noticed that since Sideways had started appearing on both sides of the battlefield, only one of his headmasters has been present. Now, when Swindle mentioned it, he described it as it looks like he lost his little pet, so he started getting angry. But that's not what Nightbeat inferred. It's something he had already noticed, that any time that the Autobot appeared on their side, to repeat information or to be on the battlefield, only the black head was present, and the little white robot following them around was gone. And apparently, if Swindle was correct, the opposite is true on the Decepticon side. Now, being in two places at once, okay, can be done, but kind of unlikely given how quick the two appearances were. Having two different bodies, okay, obviously, we've got Seekers aplenty. That's something that's done in Transformers. And Nightbeat would be ready to believe it was a Decepticon trick even if only one of the headmasters was present. But the fact that the headmaster was absent, the spare one, and it was absent on the Autobot side, meant there was only one conclusion. Two different sideways, but the heads were unique. And that is the actual conclusion here, and he's entirely correct. So, at this point, this is the point where you would expect, like, the jig is up, time to villain monologue, etc. And yeah, we can do that. Sideways, like any good double agent, doesn't let on all of the tricks he's capable of, including the whole reshaping his body, bursting into a bunch of nano machines, that kind of fun stuff. So Sideways pulls this trick in order to escape, and now, literally side by side, we have both Sideways, Autobot and Decepticon, and yes, with unique headmasters on each that he couldn't replicate for his little ruse. So, what is going on here? Why? Why was this the approach? So, while they are not a minion of Unicron in this universe, they are still connected. Sideways is a Transformer given birth after Unicron's supposedly immortal spark was destroyed by the Matrix. The little embers left over are what give rise to the brand new Sideways. And because they are born of Unicron, they seek ways of restoring Unicron to prominence and recombining his spark together. There's one catch here. There's one catch that Sideways actually lets on about, and this is my favorite part. So, Optimus Prime is asking the wrong question. He's asking, why are there two different Sideways? That's not the question. The question is, are there only two Sideways? See, what seems like a way of trapping both Sideways and getting them together is something they have been anticipating. They knew this ruse couldn't last forever, so they intentionally put themselves in vulnerable positions and allowed themselves to be captured because at this moment, many Sideways have converged on Cybertron, all bearing different heads, all bearing different faction symbols. Some Optimus Prime recognizes, some he's never seen before. And all of it culminating in what is a small army of Sideways, all born of small fragments of Unicron spark. They come here now because, well, frankly, the plasma energy chamber is creating all the power they would ever need in order to actually revive Unicron's body. But a lot of other things are starting to fall into the right places across all of the different factions of Transformers they have been spying on across the universe. The Starseeker pirates are starting to discover a lot of different treasures and relics that can be used by Unicron to gain more power and empower his minions. On the Quintesson side of things, they're building a brand new factory planet and relying on the Autobots, who, since, after, the return of Optimus Prime, they have become more friendly with. They're counting on the Autobots for defense of this planet until they get their own defenses operational, which means right now, there's a giant metal planetoid ripe for the picking for Unicron to turn into his new body. Even Geoxus and his next generation Transformers, somewhere else off in the universe, are discovering new ways of creating Cybertronian life, which is something that might lead to them being able to unite Unicron's spark once more. They come now because some areas are getting a little bit too dangerous. You know, the Wreckers are starting to get wise to a lot of this stuff. They're starting to be suspicious. You know, so their agent inside there is starting to pull the trigger on getting everyone together. But the most important aspect of this is that with all of these components now falling into place and the revival of Unicron potentially being imminent, it comes back to the same thing it's always been. There is one thing that stands in the way now, and that is the Matrix Bearer. That is, in this case, Optimus Prime. So, Autobots standing amongst dozens of different sideways, bearing different heads, bearing different colors, bearing different names, but all ultimately the same being with a unified mind, and all of them gunning for the Matrix. This is Unicron in a way we've never seen before, in a way that makes him somehow even more dangerous. They are not fighting one super powerful, gigantic being. They are fighting an overwhelming number with a hive mind designed to work together. No chaos, no intrusion, no infighting. Something that even the Autobots can't avoid. There is no disharmony here. You know, they are like-minded, and they all seek the restoration of Unicron and the destruction of the Matrix. It is a very bad situation for Optimus to have fallen in. Can he actually survive this kind of onslaught? How do you even destroy this many creatures with seemingly immortal sparks and the ability to reshape themselves as needed? That's for another time. So, sorry, cliffhanger, because this video is already going long enough. We can't get into the whole how does Optimus get out of this one. The point here was sideways, and this, I think, is a fun way to use him. You have to make sure that you can pull the head switching and faction switching more than once, which both Armada and Cybertron failed to do, which took a lot of fun and potential out of the character. But you want to keep his Unicron roots intact, albeit in a completely different fashion now. So the two together actually do create a very dangerous position for Autobot and Decepticon alike. You know, so this is Sideways. This is my take on Sideways and how I would utilize the character. And this is always fun to do. There's plenty of other underused Transformer characters out there. Feel free to leave your favorite in the description below. We might get to them someday, because they've all got potential stories that haven't been tapped yet. But until then, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.